Hi, John. Thanks for being on Funnel Vision. Excited to chat today about the differences between business development and sales. So, really excited to have you on and excited to jump in.
Yeah, good morning, Elana. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. I love this topic.
Yeah, it's a great one. And we I have this conversation all the time with, with clients and everything else. So, like, John, clear it up for us. Like, how do you define the difference between business development and sales?
Yeah, it's such a great question to start, and I get asked this a lot too, and so I'm gonna answer this based on kind of my interpretation of these two roles, based on my experience in leading sales teams and doing business development in this role for the past 8 years. But so the way I would define it is sales is when a person takes a top of the funnel lead and works it through the sales process to close. It's, some people term it as cradle to grave. And that top of the funnel, meaning, there's a large pool of potential customers out there, right? And that top of the funnel lead is someone who either has been prospected, is coming through a web lead. They're showing some interest, and the salesperson takes that lead through the sales process. And those basic processes are anything from qualifying to performing a needs analysis, presenting solutions, writing a proposal, and closing. And obviously, those are very basic. Every company's got a little bit different sales process. On the business development side, and that's when a person performs activities to build relationships with prospects, referral partners, strategic alliances, and clients to increase long-term brand recognition and increase deal flow or top of the funnel leads. And so those activities include referral strategy, center of influence marketing, content strategy, events, channel partners, networking, all those things, relationship marketing. So pure business development professionals aren't closing deals, they're cultivating relationships. And I think that's where the line gets blurred all the time. And I see this especially with small businesses, is that they say they want a business development person, but what they really want is a salesperson. Um, and again, I see this a lot with the tend to be smaller, mid-sized companies. Sales professionals are having to do business development activities. And not all salespeople are good at relationships. Some are just awesome closers, but they're not interested in building these long-term relationships and stuff like that. And there are some good salespeople out there and good relationship building salespeople, I should say, that are also good business developers. But a business development professional, they have to be good at building relationships, so that's their job. So that's
Yeah.
kind of how I would term it or define it.
Yeah, no, it is really interesting. And so and there are, like you said, there's so many companies that like blur the lines between the two. And I think also because, your most of your clients, most of our clients are small businesses,
Yeah.
there is a blurred line between the two. Like there is a lot of overlap. And you're right. Like I think most small businesses say sometimes they want a business development person, but it really is that true like full sales cycle because they're developing those relationships, filling the top of the funnel, networking, and closing.
Yeah. Well, I think what the interesting part is that the business development position, the pure BD position, is a fairly relatively new thing. So I think when business owners and not to stereotype or anything, because there's a lot of young entrepreneurs out there, but I think when you look at maybe your typical small to mid-sized business owner, they're looking back in their own experience, and when they think of business development, they think of someone prospecting, getting leads, cold calling, doing sales, doing all this, everything, right? Whereas I think recently in the last, I don't know, maybe what, 10, 15 years, the business development position has be kind of bubbled up and has filled a gap where marketing and, sales professionals have not been able to fill that gap of relationship marketing.
Yeah, yeah. And that brings me to like what are the, some like you've mentioned a couple, but like common misconceptions that people have when it comes to like business development and sales. Like are business development people like are they cold calling? Are they, they're more like networking, relationships? Like what are the most common misconceptions that you see?
Yeah, I think that's a good analogy. I think a big misconception about BD people is that Yeah, they're just going around to networking events or just meeting people and meeting with their referral partners. Maybe they're cold calling. But the truth is that BD professionals are doing a myriad of activities all at one time to achieve their goal of lead generation and building awareness for the company that they're working with. So they're hosting and running events. They're meeting with their COIs regularly and giving value. They are meeting with potential strategic alliances to develop partner relationships. They're on LinkedIn all the time, prospecting, posting, giving value. And the best are putting metrics to all that stuff to ensure that they're doing the right activities and getting the right results. So I think, I run into some, business owners and CEOs that, kind of scoff a little bit at the business development person, like, they're just, that's a nice thing to have, not a need. But you know what? Unless that business owner and CEO or the sales rep is out there doing all of those activities, they're missing out. They're missing out on a lot of growth potential, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. And you kind of touched on it, but what are some of how the business development goals and metrics differ in a BD role versus like a traditional sales rep? What are some of the most important metrics for them to be keeping track of?
Yeah, that's a good one too. I like talking about metrics. So that's a lot what we do. So in my opinion, goals and metrics need to reflect the outcomes you want from those two positions, right? So in a traditional sales role, their job is to close deals and sell, right? I mean, which leads to them reaching their monthly, quarterly, and yearly revenue goals. So in order to help them get there, you want to measure metrics around, things like prospecting, appointment set, proposals presented, close ratios, close deals, things like that. And again, generalizing. In a pure business development role, their job is to build relationships with the target market, generate leads for the organization, and build a brand. So these metrics are a little bit harder to determine, and they should focus on activity and then the outcomes of those activities. So some of the metrics we use for our clients include things like, the number of networking events they're attending and how many pre-qualified leads they meet. The number of centered influence meetings per month that they're having and the number of PQLs or QLs they're generating. The number of referrals they're getting from centers of influence and referral partners. If they're hosting events, what are the outcomes of those events and what's the ROI there? What's the meeting and the follow-up number look like? So, again, it gets a little bit sticky when you're combining both of those positions. But to me, every business development professional should have metrics and because unless you have metrics, you don't know what's working and what's, generating the best outcomes.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely like that. It makes total sense. Like even for like, I would say for salespeople that are doing the business development and sales, they should have some metrics likely that are business development metrics, which are actions, and then the sales metrics, which are more results. Is that kind of like the difference between how you would see those metrics?
Yes, yeah, definitely. Because, again, the BD person, their role is not to close business. It's really to generate relationships, build relationships with the business community or the target community, build awareness, generate leads, generate strategic partnerships and referral strategies, all those kinds of things.
Hmm.
And, the only metrics you can use there are really all based on all the activities that they're doing, because and when you start to do that and you start to measure that, you really start to see what activities work best for your industry or your product and service than others.
Yeah, I absolutely. I think it's important to keep metrics. We're very metrics focused as well. And like when I'm working with a client too, like when they're developing a new position or, we're helping them with not only job description, but also if they don't have metrics in place, like you need to be able to, keep metrics. Like what is this person that you're hiring? What metrics are they going to be kept to, or what's their scorecard, or how are they measured? And I think that makes total sense.
Yeah.
So how do you see like where do like sales and BD typically work best together? And where do they, sometimes like butt heads and kind of cause a little bit of conflict or turf wars?
Yeah. Yeah, I would probably argue that the best structure for an organization is that that three-legged stool, marketing, BD, and sales. Because in that structure, all roles have an important part to play in generating leads, building the brand, and growing the revenue. If you just look at kind of business development and sales, in my opinion, they work best together when the roles they're clearly defined. The rewards are based on activity and performance, and the communication is fluid. So in those cases, there's a project management software involved, or a CRM or something like that. I think where they can butt heads is just like everything else. There's a lack of communication between those two departments or team members. There's a lack of an overall sales or business development plan that both parties understand and adhere to. And that all can lead to, things like calling on the same leads, to interfering with the sales process, to maybe even defining the wrong prospect, So I think those are the times where they would butt head. And typically those roles work pretty well together because the salesperson understands that business development is there to help them. I mean, they're just like marketing in a way. They're there to build the awareness of the brand and the product, generate leads, generate sales opportunities. I think sometimes I see the business development folks can get a little protective of their role if the salesperson is also a pretty decent business developer. So that can become an issue sometimes, but definitely managed through a good BD plan or sales plan.
Yeah. And I think some of like the key points that I heard you say and what I absolutely agree with are the most important thing is clearly defined roles and communication
Yeah.
between sales, business development, and marketing. Because there's so many times where even if it's just sales and marketing, there's not always like there's sometimes is a little bit of friction. So like making sure that roles are clearly defined and making sure you've got great communication between all of the different kind of departments that are kind of in functions
Yeah.
is really key to making it happen and making sure everybody's on the same page.
Huge. That's
Yeah.
huge.
Yeah. So if a company is making its first hire in this area, like how what advice would you give for them to decide if they're looking for they need somebody with more BD experience or if they need a closer?
Yeah. Yeah. For small businesses, yeah, I think of a few situations that I've experienced. And I think it boils down to the strength of the CEO or the business owner and their role in the sales process. So, and I've worked under all three of these situations, which have been kind of interesting. So I would say situation number one is the business owner is a strong closer. And they like to be in that role, at least at first, while building the business, and they can step out of that role eventually. However, they don't have time to be out networking. They're running a company too, and so having a good BD person in there to build relationships, host events, do content, things like that, so that they're bringing leads can be a good scenario. Um, Situation two is the business owner is not a strong closer, but they are a relationship builder. They love being out in the community. They have a big network. They get referrals. They're bringing in leads. In that case, I would say hiring a closer to take over those leads come in can be a really strong combo. And then the last situation would be, the business owner is not sales oriented at all. And we see that a lot. So in this case, my opinion, they need a salesperson, and they need a salesperson also is going to be out there doing some business development activity. And as you know, in your role, those people are harder to find. I mean, it takes time to develop relationships and be out in the community. And it also takes time to cultivate a sale and appointments and needs analysis and follow up and proposals. So finding that perfect combination of a business development related salesperson is difficult. But I find those roles in that situation more common than the other two.
Yeah, I agree, especially because, my clients that are small businesses, oftentimes, yeah, like a lot of sometimes the owners involved in the sales process, like you said, like either they're a great business developer or they're a great closer and then hire for what you're not, right? Like bring in that next person and then build it up. But yeah, oftentimes like the owner founder is in the sales seat and is not a does not want to be,
Right.
right? Like they don't want to be at all because they're not great at sales. They don't want to be involved in sales. And I agree with you. In that case, you definitely need that like kind of 360, like that person that can do it all. And
Yeah.
it's hard to find. It's
Hard
hard
to
to find.
find.
It's important to, to really have a bring in a person that understands, the industry, or, understands that, that this company's sales cycle is stage appropriate. Like we were talking about before we started the podcast or earlier, if you've got somebody from, $100 million company, that's it, just because they did sales doesn't mean that they're going to fit a sales role for your 3 or 5 or $10 million company. Totally different. So just finding that right person that's stage appropriate is, it's a challenge, and it's a really important to get that right person in. So I agree with all of that.
Yeah, and
Um,
I think working with a business owner or CEO that is not real sales oriented, managing their expectations of a person like that in their head they need to be out doing business development and building the brand, all this thing, and they're not, but they're not hitting their sales goal. Why is that? Why aren't they hitting their so that's what I see too, as I think some business owners and CEOs have this really high expectation of those folks, and that's a big job. I mean, and so kind of where's the middle ground of like what's good activity, what is a good expectation of when they should start closing business, sales cycle, are they getting the right support and budget and resources to do the business development activity? So I think a big part of that is ensuring that the business owner and the CEO understands the sales process and what it takes, and doing good business development. It takes a lot of time.
yeah, it really does. It's a big process, and you've got to have the right person that do with the right experience. So absolutely. So looking forward, do you think that the lines between business development and sales will kind of blend more over time, or will we see like a more clear separation of the two over time, or does it really depend on the company?
Yeah, I thought that was an interesting question. I think the lines between the two have always been kind of blended. That when I first got into sales in the '90s, I was expected to generate my own leads. Marketing helped, but I had to go out and cold call. I had to go to events and prospect. The pure business development role, like I mentioned before, is fairly new. I mean, which I think is a good thing. As people know, people do business with people they like, know, and trust. And there was a gap there in the client acquisition process. I feel, marketing couldn't be out networking, cultivating COI relationships, and doing events and building strategic alliances full time, and neither could the salespeople. So these critical positions in relationship marketing kind of filled the gap. So I think now more than ever, the role of the business development person is needed. And as we get more technologically advanced, in sales and marketing, and AI starts to take over some marketing functions and outreach and admin roles, building genuine and meaningful relationships with prospects and partners becomes that more important in building the business in the long run, in my opinion.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think, yeah, AI and all the, like automation and all of that will help in these types of roles, but
Yeah.
the having those relationships is really still always where it's going to be. People, like you said, people that like and trust, like that's where it is, and
Yeah. Yeah.
got to build that.
Yeah. Yeah. Agreed.
So, John, tell us about yourself. What do you do? Where can people find you? And a little bit about your background.
Well, thanks. Always been in business development, sales, and operations. Last role, I was the president and publisher of the Baltimore Business Journal. I left there in 2017 to start Dinkel Business Development, which is a business development strategic advisory based in Baltimore. And we basically help organizations build a better plan and process around their relationship marketing lead gen using a metric driven business development approach. So we, in essence, build BD strategic plans and playbooks, and we help companies implement those plans. So BD coaching and training, and we use all those tactics we talked about to help organizations build more relationships with their prospects and partners. Um, my son and I work together. My son is our VP of operations. He handles all the content strategy and creation. And It's been a lot of fun. I've learned a ton about, business development tactics and techniques over the past 8 years. And I just love it. I got into doing this because I love helping people, and I love seeing organizations, and I love seeing people grow. So it's just a lot of fun. And we have a website. It's dinkelbusinessdevelopment.com, and or you can look us up on LinkedIn. We're all over the place there.
Perfect. Well, yeah, John, thank you so much for being on the podcast. Really appreciate it. I think this is truly valuable information for people, that are even people that are in sales and business
Yeah,
development
absolutely.
all the time. Like, where's the difference? Like,
Yeah.
so I think all of your, information here and conversation was so helpful. So thank you so much. And yeah, we will chat again soon.
Yeah, thank you, Elana. It's been great. And I really enjoyed the conversation, and yeah, I look forward to talking to you soon.
Thank you.